Good. Having redisposed of the monster. Yeah, so we've got tools in our toolbox. We're adding the 202 and a couple other forms today that we can look at. So we're up in the upper hand corner here, identification and genetics. So if we zoom in on that, I don't use this all that much because genetics is a long-term thing and usually beyond the scope of what we're trying to do on a particular farm. And there are lots of people that will take care of that for a farm, the genetics and figuring out where they should be in their program and all that stuff. But it does give you some demographic, it does give you some feel for what the farm might be. So we want to see that our average merit should be going up as the animals are younger. So we're making genetic progress. So that gives you a feel for where the herd is and what's important to them. Over here, the AI versus non-AI. What do we have? How are they breeding? What is more important, the pregnancies for the animals or the genetic progress? In some farms, it's just about getting them pregnant. I don't care to who or to what, just get them pregnant so we can milk around the other side. I think it's a little short-sighted when we're thinking about the progress we can make. The money we spend on AI is relatively small compared to other things. Not a large difference between the best and the average animals. Well, some of the better ones, not maybe the best. Best ones certainly have there. So you get a feel for what they're doing and how they're doing it, what the age and distribution is of the herd. But for making recommendations, this isn't usually an area I go to. There are other people that can take care of that. And you're looking at genetic effects that are 4, 5, 6 years down the road when you're making these decisions. Now we're going to have effects later. They're kind of hard to project out. Lactation summary. I always go to this section on the back. Production by lactation summary. So we have the number of cows in each category. So first, second, third lactation, all animals total, that's milking plus dry. So we can get a feel for how well we're doing. Our age to first calving is right here. So that's where that appears on the 202, the age to first calving. So we're at 23 months, give or take a half. I assume it's rounded to the nearest whole number. So if we're going to look at the 4 plus 1, that's where we find that age to first calving right there. We can say we've got 23 to 36. That suggests our calving interval is 13 months. What about 36 to 58? These two. Is the next one 22 months? No, because you've got 3 plus lactations. So the average age of the animals, we can't do it stepwise from second to 3 plus and learn something. So the first 3 numbers there are helpful when you're trying to get the demographics of the herd. Peak versus summit milk. What did I say about that last week? Did I get into the definitions a little bit? So what's a peak milk? It used to be the highest test day in the entire lactation, wherever it occurred. Now it's the highest test day in the first 150 days. So where would we like that? Which test day would we like to see our peaks, given the shape of our lactation curve? second or third, depending on where she calves relative to test day. So if she's too fresh on the first one, it might be the third test day. If she calves right after test day, it should be on the second one. So that 56 days, 60 days, somewhere in there. So we'd expect that peak milk to be in that second or third test day. So assuming this is a DHI test. So we're looking at the ratio of 100% for 3+. %, for our second lactation, 90% of our 3+, and then 80, depending on where we are, or 75% is a little bit more forgiving on our first lactation peaks. The same relationship holds with summit milk. Summit milk is a slightly different calculation. It is in the first three test days, the average of the highest two. So it doesn't matter where we are, 1, 2, or 3, we take the highest two and average. So if we've got normal lactation curves, why is summit always going to be less than peak? Just mathematically.
You're averaging two together instead of just picking the
So you've got the highest one and the next one down to average. Peak is just here, and then summit is the average of these two. So it's always going to be a number less, or at least it should be if everything's normal. If we start to look at these two numbers, it's been my experience that if peak and summit are farther apart than 8 pounds, something's wrong or requires further investigation on the shape of those curves. So what has to happen if there's a difference of 16 pounds between these two numbers? £8, sorry, 8 pounds between those two numbers. Just gave away the answer. The average, in order for them to be apart, the average of those two numbers, they have to be 16 pounds apart, and that's huge. What usually happens when that happens is you've got a peak that's somewhere out in here, and you're measuring summit 1, 2, 3, somewhere in here. So you've got a way higher peak, and then you've got an average of these two numbers, and you've got a difference of 8 pounds. So we're not seeing that on this particular thing there. We got what, 5, 3, 2, 4. So odds are the peaks, especially for the first calf heifers, are occurring in those first 3 test periods. That is not something that's always happened here. We've had peaks a little bit farther out on our animals, but we seem to be doing a better job growing up our heifers and getting them to full size when they calve in. So they're going to eat a little bit more aggressively, produce a little bit more aggressively, spend less time growing in the first lactation off of that milking cow diet, and spend more times partitioning energy and nutrients to milk. So if you're doing partial budgets, these projected 305-day actual are very useful. That if you're losing a first calf heifer, you'd expect almost 25,000 pounds lost for that animal. If you're losing a more mature animal, we're up around 31,000, a little bit more, 32,000. An average animal in here produces 28,767. So if you're doing partial budgets and trying to figure out how much milk is produced per lactation, 305 day. So this sort of means are kind of on a yearly basis. we're a little bit longer than that. Our lactations are probably 335 to 360, depending on where we are. We're 13-month calving interval. So this is for lactation. Remember, it's not for the year. So if you're going to make adjustments or use that partial budgeting, which is usually on a yearly basis, you're going to have to make some adjustments. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So differences from herd mates. I'm not really sure what that means. Average body weight. What do we know about these numbers? Anybody seen a test day here? Do you think anybody weighs animals on this herd, even the DHI? Hello? DHI, these are garbage on this herd. When I was growing up, tie stall barn, our DHI tester used to go and do tape weights on all the cows. But somebody's making those numbers up because they don't get up there on the platform on the deck and measure those animals. And I know we're a little bit bigger than this on our mature animals. We did a thing last spring. We're up around 1,500 pounds on our mature animals. So depending on the farm you're on, you have to check whether or not these average body weight numbers are of any use to you. On this farm, these are junk. But the computer requires numbers, so I'm guessing they're just throwing in 1,100 for first lactation animals, 1,200, and then probably 1,300 for the other ones. So that's way off. So we've got extension, we've got first, second, third lactation, we've got production summary, and then we're going over, bleeding over on the edge there to the somatic cell. We're carrying that first, second, third lactation and average all the way across. So I didn't copy those in. So this is a somatic cell. What do we know about 0, 1, 2, and 3 for linear scores? Does anybody know? What does that mean? So this is somatic cell score. Normally we abbreviate that somatic cell score, but they're saying somatic cell count score there, which is probably a mistake on some level. So what do we know about the animals in this column? What? There's lactations. We've got 1 horizontally, 1, 2, 3 plus, and then average over our animals. What do we know about that first column, not the row? They're good. Those we consider 0, 1, 2, and 3 uninfected. So 4 is 200,000. That's the break point between infected and uninfected. So these should be uninfected animals. We've got 4, 5, and 6. Does everybody know what these numbers? Maybe I haven't told you what these numbers mean. Okay, so we need somatic cell score. Versus somatic cell count. So somatic cell score, we talk about 4. This is a log transform of the actual somatic cell count. It's to the base 2. If anybody really cares about math, log base 2. So 400,000 is going to be 200,000 cells per milliliter. Yes, it's Wednesday lecture tomorrow. We talk about that. And then this is a log transform. So why do we want to have like 0, 1 through 9 numbers? Any thought why we might want to log transform these? We know that one cow up here on the raw numbers, the somatic cell counts, can really skew our average. And that's certainly what the cow, if you put her in the tank, what she'll do. But if we do an average or what's in the tank, that doesn't give you a fair representation of how many animals are infected versus not. The average doesn't, it's kind of skewed. So what we need to do is we got 3, 2, 1, 0. So each step up, we cut it in half. So a 3 is 100,000, 2 is 50,000, 1, 25,000 cells per milliliter, and then 0 is quote unquote 0, but mathematically you never get there. Going up, we start doubling. So 5, 400,000. So exponential growth. 6, 800,000. 7, 1 million. Is that right? Looks about right. No. 0.6 million. 8. 3.2 million. 9. 60.4 million somatic cell. So the general rule of thumb, it's not perfect in the reality that this here to here, uninfected. So 0, 1, 2, and 3 are uninfected. We get up to 4, we become infected. These are generally considered subclinical. So animals ranging from 200,000 to 1 million or so are considered subclinical. Does that mean anything to you? They have a high somatic cell and no other symptoms of mastitis. No clots, no hot quarters, no fever, no off feed, no hot, swollen quarters. The only thing they have is the subclinical somatic cell. Now, technically, they don't look sick, but they have an infection or had an infection or something. That to me is a clinical sign. So subclinical might be a bit of a misnomer. And then these other ones here, these are high enough that they might fall into the clinical category where we're going to see clots, we're going to see discolored milk, we're going to see swollen quarters, we're going to see the whole body reacting to an infection. So having this group over here, uninfected, versus the severe infections over here, and then what we're looking for. So tomorrow or next Monday, I'll show you where this comes from. So based on the somatic cell scores, you're going to lose a certain amount of milk from each cow that has a somatic cell over probably 4 or 5. It's going to lead to tissue loss, less milk secretion, and will add up to a percentage of the milk lost over the lactation. They go through and they add up. We got 5 cows here, or 5% here, 1%, 8%, 5%, 4%. That's going to add up to a certain amount of milk lost by the herd. So they calculate that if we had all of our cows over here in this first column, we'd be producing across 30 days, an extra almost 7,000 pounds of milk over a 30-day period, what we've lost since last test day. So if we can get everybody here shoved over into this column, this becomes 0, and then we multiply it 0 over there. So gives you a feel for what your mastitis control, if you put some effort into it, what things might happen. So we want as many as we can over in this column. Here, pretty standard. If you get about 85% in this, you're doing all right. So we're a little low here on our mature animals, but they tend to get dirtier as they go up. They spend more time, milk more lactations. They tend to kind of shift over. You get your chronics and your animals infected. As we said, 4, 5, and 6 are subclinical. 7, 8, and higher are your clinical cows. So we want to shift everything as much as we can over to the left. Try to minimize the severe infections, shift everything to the left. So 85% is usually a pretty good number. Shift it over to the left. If you're less than that, you have to start asking questions. Is there an opportunity? And there's a small one right here with a 1/3 or greater lactation. If we can go through, figure out where those somatic cells are coming from, there's an opportunity. Any questions on that? So moving down to the dry cow program, and then yearly summary of cows entering and entered and left the herd. So you usually get pretty confident numbers over the dry cow profile. If you're entering good dry off dates and good calving dates, it's kind of hard to screw those up. So why are we blank up here on this first lactation? They don't have a dry period before. We should be managing them like with late close up and things like that, but they don't have a specific dry period. So we need a previous lactation. So we'd like all our animals to be in this range here. So I think our goal is 45 days here. So we'd expect everything between 40 and 70 in that column. What do we know about animals less than 40 days dry? Probably something went wrong. Either we dried off to the wrong breeding date and they calved in early, or they got mastitis while they're dry and calved in early. Something happened. So we don't want animals in that column if we can avoid it. And then if our breeding program is the way it should be, we shouldn't have animals that are dry for more than 70 days. So we're looking to place all those animals. Again, we got first, second, third plus lactation overall. We're trying to place animals in that middle column if we can. So we got animals entering the herd and then leaving the herd. So what do you tell by looking at what you got? What's happening here from a management standpoint at this farm? Here's that they're raising all their own replacements, right? The only animals coming in are first lactation animals. We're not buying and selling animals. Animals leaving, you've got from those 3 different categories: first lactation, second lactation, third lactation. So those should be fairly, you could be fairly confident those are okay. Recording when animals leave and enter the herd, that's pretty hard to mess up. The challenge is, are we coding these animals the way that makes sense for DHI and for you. There are a lot of farms that have a completely different coding system for why animals are leaving the herd. There's one farm north of here that's like, we buy a lot of animals in and I want to know how long they lasted and why they left. So trying to get the cheap animals at auction, milk them out, and then sell them off. So we do a fairly good job here quantifying why things are leaving, but there are some places where they don't. So you got to ask, how confident can I be in the number of cows that left the herd, for what reason and why? So asking that question. So ultimately, all cows leave for low milk production. If they're milking, we keep them around. But there are other reasons that we might get rid of them. So this is looking at the last year. How many have left the herd? There are 25 animals. We are at a 21% in left the herd for involuntary reasons. So we're looking at that number as a general rule. Now this gets screwed up with sex semen breeding, beef on dairy, all those things. But as a general rule, this percent of the herd left for involuntary reasons, if it's in the mid 30s, generally our herd is staying the same size. If it's in the mid 40s, we're losing cow numbers, we're shrinking. If we're down in the 20s, that means usually we're growing. Those are not perfect numbers, but mid 20s suggests we're growing. Mid 30s suggests we're staying the same size. And mid 40, we're trying to prevent that loss from there. So involuntary versus voluntary culling. What's the difference between those two? So we have a bunch of animals, probably from here over, that left for production reasons. So they died, their feet don't work no more, they got repro failure. All those things might be considered involuntary reasons. They got to a point where they just can't produce anymore. We had, quote unquote, no control over that. Whereas low production or dairy, we might say that we've got animals that we've decided we're just not keeping around anymore or selling for dairy at the auction. We are making a choice that they are no longer part of our herd. That's a voluntary decision to get rid of that animal. She's still productive, she's still useful, but we've chosen to get rid of her for whatever reason. Maybe we're selling animals one way, shape, or form. Maybe we are just downsizing, or maybe we've got too many good animals around for what we're doing. So again, you have to ask, what is your repro code? What is your mastitis code? What are your feet and legs? Injury, disease, what animals fall in what category? Not reported. You don't see this a lot, but there's probably a lot of times where the DHI technician coming in is making up the reasons. You need to check on those things before you hang your hat. If you're confident in the numbers on some level, you have to start for the main reasons that animals are leaving the herd. So what are our main reasons we're leaving the herd here over the summer? Over the last year from July. Looks like repro, injury, and production and mastitis are our four big ones. Is there an opportunity to reduce any of those? One would think there have been places where, yeah, we haven't fixed that feed line. The animals keep getting putting their head through underneath the headlocks. There's a broken set of concrete there, and they keep hanging themselves. We haven't gotten around to fixing it. It's like, can't you just take some plywood and some wire and put a couple pieces of plywood in there and at least slow them down from getting in there? So, what is the reason animals are leaving the herd? I would think we need to take a look at injury as an opportunity. Is it because we got slippery floors? Is it because cows are bad, well, not bad feet and legs, or doing something out there that maybe with a management change we can get a hold of? Or are there animals that are failing reproductively? Is there something we could do different with them to save some of those animals to keep them around a little bit longer? So there's are places to look for opportunities to make recommendations. Bottom section, we've got, instead of sorting things by lactation, we're sorting the last test days over the last year. So we've got 11 test days here. It looks like we're missing May in there some way. So we lost, there's usually 10 every 35 days or so. We got a big number there, 49, so it looks like we missed a day. But we usually have the last 10 months, and then the top is the test day we're dropping. So in this case, it sort of matches the July a year ago. So we can look at trends over the last year. Are we getting better or worse in any of these areas? So let's start with the left side first and see what that tells us. So we got all the test dates there, the time period between the test dates, number of cows in the herd on test day. So that's milking and dry cows. We've got test day averages just for milking cows. Where are they in days in milk average? Where are they from a production standpoint? So it's an opportunity to look for seasonal effects. So is there a time of year where we produce less milk than other times of the year? There's also an opportunity to see whether we're going up in a particular category and lower in a particular category. So if we're looking at our herd, we're growing. So that matches our cull rate just above that. We're keeping animals around a little bit longer. Our days in milk were a lot higher. They came down and now they're creeping back up again. They're still good, 160, 170, especially with the amount of milk we're producing, is pretty good. We start to get up about over 200. We were starting to creep in that direction. Here, we get up above 200, 190, 200. We usually have a reproductive problem. We're stretching the lactations out. They're staying in lactation longer, not milking as well. We want, in theory, about 105-day milk. So you got that 105-day corrected milk. The bigger the difference between this number, 150, and the number over here, the greater the discrepancy between actual milk and then test day milk. So if you get down here in the 80, we got a 7-8 pounds difference. If we had all of our animals a little bit earlier in lactation, they'd be producing a little bit more. They're back up the lactation curve. Versus when we get down here to 150-ish, the numbers are a lot closer. So we're correcting it to 150 So if you have a really bad repro problem that's showing a big discrepancy between the milk you're producing and the milk you could be producing, there's an opportunity there to say, hey, there's an opportunity here. Let's see if we can fix your repro problem. It's worth so much in milk. It's worth so much in preg rate is worth something. Reduced days open, $2 to $3 a piece for that. Persistency, test persistency index. We're looking for 100% there. So we have the shape of a curve. We predict where the animal is. We compare what we predict for that animal based on her previous test days and where we predict and where she actually is. If she's above where we predict her to be, she's greater than 100%. If we're below where we need to be, she's less than 100%. If we're right on, we're at 100%, then we average all our animals. So we, as a general rule, stick pretty close to 100, varying a couple points either direction. So that's fairly normal. So we got, we hope, some fairly normal lactation curves. Percent in milk. So from the front page, that number we had last time is right here. Over the last year, we've averaged 88. We're a little below that. We're a little higher than we were. We've dropped one, replaced it with a higher. So percent of the herd in milk is what? Everybody remember from last time? So number of milking cows over milking plus dry. And we want that number to be 85 or higher. If we have a even calving interval throughout the year, which we don't, so we're going to go a little above that and a little below that depending on where we are. So test day averages all cows. What does that mean? This blue area. Average milk for lactating and dry cows. I guess that's what we can account for. So if we're doing our partial budgets, we can either use this milk and then just the animals that are milking, or we can use this milk amount here, but then you have to use your milking plus dry cows. So trying to figure out who's in our partial budget, how many animals are being affected, what milk difference are we looking at? You got to make sure that you're doing the lactating or lactating plus milk there. Rolling herd averages, this is a corrected number, not an actual number. So this is a point of comparison. So we're not doing as well as we were a year ago. We're about 500 pounds, looks like 500, 600 pounds down on a corrected rolling herd average, but you're not actually getting paid that milk from anybody. So again, looking at your test days, got the somatic cell profile, the average line that we had up here all the way for each month. So how are we doing from a somatic cell standpoint across the herd? We getting better or worse? Looks like right now we're about average for the first year. Looks like we had a little bit of a spike going through here. We usually have something in August. We seem to, for whatever reason, in August, we get a lot of mastitis cases. I assume it has to do with the heat. But we can tend to come down. So we want, again, all of our animals to be over in this first column. We're looking for 85% of the herd or higher. So it's an opportunity to look for seasonal effects related to our calving or somatic cell. Historically, August and September are usually our high months. I like to blame it on the students coming back, but this happens usually before the students get back. So average linear score. So if we average out all of the 1s through 9s that we have, we're down below a 2. That's pretty good for our hurt. So 1 point something for most of last year. The actual weighted somatic cell in the tank, this should be pretty close. If you put all the milk from the cows into the tank, and we're doing most of our milk in the tank at the moment, putting them in. So this is not far off from where we are. I think we were 120 for the month of July, so not far off from where we actually got paid. And then animals left the herd or sold in the herd. Again, you're looking for months that are way different than any other month over the last year. Looking for seasonality, looking for opportunities. And again, we're letting the herd expand, so we're maybe not selling as many animals as we might. Any questions on the back side? So do you feel you can take a look at one of these and start to analyze it? So we're going to give you a bunch of different ones next week. The opportunity to analyze and ask questions. But we got a couple things that we need to go over to get you ready for that. Is everybody ready for a break? Matt says yes. What about the rest of you? Kirsten says yes. Anna's like, I don't care. Okay. Take a few minutes, stretch, and we'll do a discussion here of how we analyze a farm using some of the things at our disposal. Okay. I assume this is 2025. Okay.
You're supposed to do that, so she, I didn't know. That's the one to every. Yes. Sure. I read it was like. Not communication.
Like,
What do you do?
look how long, how many weeks. It's
4 weeks, depending on how you sleep. Okay. Maybe. It's pretty fun.
That's one big one. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so some other reports that you might run into that you might have access to. We don't seem to get this one anymore, but this is a from a previous year. This is the MUN profile report. I think you have to pay extra for it. So we have days in milk, the different parts of the lactation, first lactation, second lactation, third lactation. Overall at the bottom. So milk, urea, nitrogen. We're looking for something Sarah likes to see between 10 to 12 milligrams per deciliter. So that is an indicating 10 to 12 milligrams per deciliter for MUNs. Indicates we're utilizing our nitrogen, our protein the way we should. So as a rule here, it looks like we're not too far off. Most of our cows are in those two middle columns there. The greater than 16, we started getting to months of 18, 19, and 20. We're going to start compromising our reproductive performance, especially in the 20s. The urea can go anywhere in the body. It gets to the uterus. If that uterus is not as clean as it might be, the bacteria are going to break that urea apart into two ammonias and screw up the pH in the uterine environment. So that's going to lead to sperm not being happy, eggs not being happy, embryos not being happy. So we want certainly the MUNs in the right place for our protein efficiency, making sure that we're doing things. The monitor, you've all seen that here before. That's another source of information. This is the Dairy Comp 305. Its answer to the 202. The nice thing about this is it shows it in, you've got over the last year, what everything is, and then you can customize the different rows there to get the ones that you need or want. I think there's an opportunity here to update things and maybe get some measurements that are a little bit more robust than the default ones we've always had. So, we have, at least historically, not recorded stuff as well as we might. We know that sometimes there's been surgeries that haven't been recorded. We do all the antibiotics associated, but maybe we don't get the surgery. So I want you to ponder as we go through. At some point, I will ask you, probably next semester, to answer this question. But if you only had 10 measurements or parameters to decide if a dairy is doing well or poorly, which 10 would you pick? What things do you need to know to make a decision that yes, this farm is doing a good job, no, it's not. So if you think about your 202, how many different numbers are on there? Hundreds, right? Which 10 would you pick? And it might be different depending on how I'm going to manage my own farm. I'm going to probably pick a different 10 than if I go out and talk to a farm, what numbers I want them to provide me with. So we've learned lots of different ways to measure. There's lots of different tools in your toolbox. Which 10 would you like to have available to you? So how do we evaluate a farm? This is the direction we're moving. We've collected some data for the farm here. You've looked at the 202 for Morrisville. How are you going to evaluate the dairy? Decide whether or not they're doing good things or bad things. So, and it's also different if you're evaluating your own farm, what numbers we might track or put emphasis on versus someone else's. What numbers am I going to ask for when I go out? So it's all about finding the bottlenecks on the farm that you're working with. So we've talked about areas that you can improve. So you take a look at each of those areas and decide, is this area being managed well? Are we successful in this area or are we not? So finding the bottleneck, and everybody understands that the bottleneck is the limit to progress, the limit to performance, something that's slowing you down in some way, right? Bottlenecks. When you pour stuff out of the bottle, that narrow opening is going to be the limiting factor to getting stuff out of the bottle. So analyzing dairy, I recommend that you start with a big picture kind of view. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? And on something I'll come back to over and over again, describe, analyze, recommend. So you have your 202, that's a description of the farm as it currently exists. You should be able to now take that 202 and decide this is a good number, we're doing good here, or this is a bad number, we need to improve here. You guys feel fairly confident if you had your cheat sheet with you that you could work through that and say, yes, this is a good number, no, it's not? It's a start, right? As we analyze a dairy, we have to remember our audience at the end of it all. We're going to go back to the producer and talk to them about what we think is working well and where we can improve and how. So you want to tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a farm. This farm was doing these things really, really well. But we were a little less than optimal, a little less than average for these things. That's costing you a certain amount of money. I think we can fix it by doing this. If we fix it by doing this, you're going to save this much money and you're going to live happily ever after. So taking your producer by the hand and walking through things step by step with clarity and explanation. And if you want to get a producer's attention, you talk about the money. Most of the time, you make a recommendation to a producer, what might you guess is their first reaction? How much is it going to cost me? First reaction is usually, no, it isn't. Nope, it's not a problem. You're wrong. So you have to be able to back up your assertions. You have to be able to prove your assertions. We don't want the farmers at these things next semester when we bring them in here to let them hear your recommendations. Turn around, Mooney, is that true? It's like, yep. And we've had that case where a farmer was being charged for, I think it was a 2824 milk replacer, but the tag said it was 2420. And he turned around and goes, is this true? It's like, that's what it says on your tags. Go take a look at your tags. So we know 2824 or something like that is more expensive than the 2420. So showing the producer the money gets their attention, gets them to focus on the problem the same way you have. So everybody's got their SWOTs down, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's part of our analysis phase. We go through and say, here's what is, here's what should be. If we're doing really well, that becomes a strength. If we're doing really poorly in that area, it becomes a weakness. That's where most of our things going through like a 202, that's where we're going to end up. This is a strength, this is a weakness. Moving through. Partial budgets, they're going to be part of our recommendations. How much is it going to cost me to fix this? Is that going to return me? If I spend this money, am I going to get more back than I lost? And that's where our partial budgets come in. We got to go through as best we can and project what's going to be had and not had, gained and not gained, gained and lost, and then add those up, and we hope it comes out to the positive. So when we're thinking about a dairy, we need to get a feel for who they are. If we're going to give good recommendations, we got to understand what's important to them and what they may or may not be willing to do. So what are the goals of this operation? What do they need? What do they want? What are their dreams going forward? And can we, as a recommender, help them achieve those goals and dreams? Help them get their wants? Help them achieve their needs? If I'm being invited out to a farm, I want to know why. What's the problem? Why are you asking me? Why'd you call me? And I've certainly had a number of different reasons why people have called me over the years. And then we want to, it's good. Has everybody read that sign on Professor Hayes's doors? Unexpected, uncommunicated expectations are premeditated resentments. So you need to know what they expect of you. There needs to be a clear, well, I can do this, I can't do that. What can we do? What can't we do? set the expectations between you and the producer. What are we going to do? What are we going to provide? What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? Records. What records are available to us as we get to this farm? What is the quality of those records? Are they accurate? Are they complete? And how many do we have? What forms are there? Sometimes you got very complete dairy comp. Other times you got kind of a incomplete notebook that gets you partially to where you are. And we have to adjust our expectations based on the information that we have to work. Be nice to know the daily schedules. If I'm going out on a farm, I like to show up when they're milking or even before. It's always good to, if you're going, especially by yourself, on these larger farms, that somebody warns that you're showing up. So somebody that they don't recognize walking around going all kinds of weird things, measuring and all that stuff, that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows and probably cause some anxiety. We went out in California a couple years back for the Dairy Challenge. And they canceled all the farm visits. You're supposed to have farm visits beforehand that you can go and explore and stuff. They canceled them all because of bird flu. So me showing up, we had a white van that we rented at the airport. Us showing up and parking on the edge of a farm is certainly going to create some anxiety, right? White van showing up at a farm, especially now. So letting people know who we are, why we're there is important. So being able to, I like to watch milking proceed. I like to watch how the cows go back and forth from the parlor, how they interact with their hens when they're done. And then I want to make sure that I have a meeting time established with the people I want to talk to. So I'm gonna get there at 7. I'm gonna walk around. I'm gonna look at things, and then at 9, after morning preg check, we're gonna meet and talk for a few minutes. Hopefully I have questions by then. Hopefully I have observations that prove I'm capable of doing the job. So proving my validity, proving my competence by saying, I saw this and I saw that. Is that what this means? And they're like, yeah, how'd you know that? So that's always fun. So before we go to visit, we need to ask about the producer's goals, and these can be in a lot of different areas. But our recommendations need to be tailored to our producer's goals. So what are the thoughts about profitability? There's a farmer south of here. He goes, if I don't get 10% every year, I need to change things. 10% return on assets for 10% return on equity. Other people, it's like, I just want to survive to next year. What are their goals relative to size? Are they growing? Are they getting ready to get out of the business? Expanding, contracting? That will influence your recommendations. We had a dairy challenge farm a couple years back that he goes, I'm done in 3 years. There's nobody coming up behind me. I don't have any kids. I'm selling out in 3 years. So that made it very difficult for the students to make recommendations, because if it didn't pay off within a year or two, he wasn't going to do it. Where's retirement on this farm? Where's the next generation? Is there a next generation, both family and non-family? Who's coming into the business? Who's going out? What are their feelings about technology? Your generation's a lot more comfortable with technology and what it can do for you and willing to work with it and look at things and fight with computers and all that stuff, then certainly my dad is. I don't know if my dad would know how to turn on a computer. Ain't got no use for those fucking expensive things. What do they feel about high production? They want high production. What do they mean by that? They want to be the highest in the farm shine and the country folks. The highest listed one there. Do they want to have good income over feed costs? Do they want bragging rights down at the diner? What do they want? There's some people, it's like, I'll take a few less pounds of milk if I have a little less problems, a little easier breeding. Take a little less milk. That's not usually pencils out, but if that's the way they want things, that's the way you need to organize your recommendations. Do the goals of all the key players match? Does the herdsman agree what the important things or the problems are? Does he agree with the owner? Does she agree with everybody else? All the people in management or have a stake in this, do they all agree? Are they all on the same page? More often than not, they are not. So sorting through things when you talk to individual players, individual managers, individual owners, it's nice if they all had the same goals. At least the big ones should all be the same. Herd information I might be able to collect. Give me a feel for what I should be looking for benchmarks, what I should be looking for comparison analyses going through. So number of cows gives me a good feel for the demographics, how big we are, what we may or may not be able to do. We got number of milk cows. If we can sort things by lactation, all the better. Fairly standard number, average milk per cow per day. Is that produced or shipped? Those two numbers can be different. They used to be different here when we were pulling stuff out. We're pulling out 500, 400 pounds, 500 pounds a day to pasteurize. That would drop us 3 or 4 pounds shipped per cow. What's the rolling herd average? This is a standard number we can use for standardized number we can use for comparison. What is the average for the state? What is this farm as compared to the neighborhood? Average days in milk, where are we from a reproductive standpoint? Are we in that 160, 170 range, 160s, 170s? We're not in that 190, 200, 210 range that suggests our repro is off. What do we know about somatic cell? We should be at least be able to get a bull tank somatic cell. It gives you a feel for how they manage things. We know everybody's got to be below 400 now, or a 5 on a linear scale. Is that the legal limit? No, but that's what co-ops are taking. Bacteria. So it's all relative to, if you have a producer that tells you, well, our production is good, or tells you our production is bad, ask them to clarify with the number. We were at a farm just up the street here, and they said, yeah, our repro is not where we want it to be. Said, yeah, it's not as good as it could be. I said, well, what does that mean to you? And they looked at me and smiled. They said, well, we're at 28. We think we should be at 32 preg rate. So their idea of what was bad was perhaps a little bit different than maybe the average farmer out there. So finding out what their goals, expectations are, what their performance standards are, helps you figure out where the strengths and weaknesses are on a farm. Also helpful to know anything you can learn about the herd, reproductive information, anything they can share, anything they can provide to you with that. Herd health, feeding information, how do they get their cows fed? What are their feed inventories? You're going to make a direction or recommendation to put on 10 more cows. Do they have enough feed to do that over the next year? Feed inventory. So any information that can be provided either before you get there or when you get there can be helpful for our opportunities. Figuring out where we're going to go with our recommendations. So walking the animals, we get to the farm, we like to start with calves. Everybody know why? We scrub in, we scrub out, and we'd like to do the calves first because we don't want to be tracking stuff from the cows to the calves. At least we don't want to get blamed for it. So if we walk in that direction, I know Sarah usually does that. She'll start out with the calves. We'll loop up there and then work our way back to the milk cows. She scrubs in, scrubs out for a nutrition check. So working from youngest to oldest, if we can, taking a look at the facilities and how they're providing cow comfort, looking at the milking system, how stressed or not stressed that might be, figuring out the feeding system. Is it what it's supposed to be? I know I was on one farm where there were a lot of protein fat inversions, and my job was to figure out why. And I said, have you ever noticed that your feeder is always perfect? Every time they come up to that wagon, they dump in and everything is perfect. They never have too much or never have to go back and get more. They're always perfect every time. And if we think about that, probably you're going to under feed your forages and you overfeed your grains in a system like that. Whereas you might have leftover, you take it back, or you might be short. Taking a look at the feed if we can, if it's safe to do so. Making sure that our feed is clean, not rotted, fresh, not heated. There's one farm I once went on where you could burn your hand on that forage. That's because they defaced 2 days in advance. The feeder didn't like to deface in the morning, so to get everything done, the owner did it the night before, the day before, so that aerated feed sat for 2 days. By the time you fed it, you could burn your hand on it. I think that influenced production. So going back to the 202s. So what is your plan of attack looking at these 202s? We're going to review the 202. Then we're going to do a summary SWOT of everything you learned on that 202. Based on that, we're going to come up with what we suggest might be a solution. And then we have to put a partial budget on that solution. So we take a look at the records, we figure out where the strengths and weaknesses are. We're going to start with the 202s. We're going to expand to records and looking at the cows. We're one of the few schools that is very good at looking at cows, but that's just who we are. So taking a look at our cows. When Professor Marshman likes to look at a farm, she likes to start at the balance sheet and then work her way through. I like starting at the cows and working my way back to the balance sheet. Doesn't matter as long as you cover everything along the way. Find the method, find the order that works best for you. We're going to describe, analyze, and recommend. So let's start with the 202 you just had. What is the SWOT on this 202? So taking a look at what we've been through, what'd you come up with? What's right and what's wrong in this area? What's a strength and what's a weakness in this area? I assume you guys want to work together on this, or do you want to work individually? Rock, paper, scissors? What are we doing? Pairs, okay. Okay, so, and that way the judging team can sit down, watch this all together, and they can work together, right? So so we're gonna come up with strengths, weaknesses, that's gonna be the focus, plus opportunities and threats. What, based on looking at the 202, what do you see? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you've got the 202 for this farm. You can go over if you want. I can get you a copy of the monitor. Want that? You've also gotten, you went through and measured all these animals individually. Any inferences from those measurements of body conditions or T-DANS score? Got any inklings of what might be a strength or weakness for the stuff you've looked at already? Or just being around here, what do you know? Be helpful if I let. I would be offended. You want to leave for a couple minutes. All right. Great talk. Argue.
With age, we're just not going
Okay, for the fun for the judging team, I'm going to end it here. And you guys can work on it on your own, so you're not being coached by the people that are here. So I'm going to stop the recording.